Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third installation of Old Scribes, our new podcast that we hope everybody's enjoying. Like to say hello to my old friend George Willis. Thanks, George, for doing this with me and for being here today.
Always a pleasure. Looking forward to it.
So we have a lot to get to. Busy weekend of everything: boxing, football, everything. So let's get to it. Today is September 16th, which means that 43 years ago, there's a pretty big fight happening at Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas. It was the undisputed welterweight championship between Sugar Ray Leonard and Thomas Hearns. It is widely regarded as probably of that era the best fight of the era, and kind of the fight that kind of kicked off just a incredible run of great fights from 147 pounds all the way to 160. So to commemorate that huge fight, which was called the Showdown, we're going to talk a little bit about the fight, how old we were maybe when we saw it, and where we saw it, and what the fight itself and what we thought of it. So, George, I'm going to let you kick this one off.
Okay.
Where'd you see the Showdown on September 16th, 1981?
Well, I was 21 years old, and so I was attending New Mexico State University. And I remember watching the fight at, I think it was one of the student union centers on campus, maybe Corbett Center at the time. I know we went with a couple of friends, and we watched the fight. We were very much looking forward to it. At the time, I was I had been working at the Las Cruces Sun News. So I would cover a little bit of boxing. That's when I started covering boxing. And of course, back then, the Olympics were such a big thing, and that was when I was first introduced to Sugar Ray Leonard. And it was a big thing when he fought in the Olympics in '76 in Montreal, to the point where you looked forward to his fights. You knew when he was going to compete in the Olympics, and it was a huge deal. And as I recall, Ray wasn't even going to enter boxing after the amateurs. He was going to go on to some sort of business kind of career, but he had been so highly successful in boxing and basically needed the money, so he became professional and was basically one of the most popular fighters that ever lived. And there was this gradual showdown between he and Hearns, because Hearns was undefeated out of the Kronk Gym in Detroit, and Emmanuel Stewart and all that. And they were on this big collision course to fight each other. And unlike today's boxing, where everybody seems to him and haw and dance around each other and fights never happen, those fights got made. So there was a lot of anticipation for that fight. And as a college student, I was really looking forward to it. So that's where I saw the fight.
Yeah, I saw it. I was, right down the road from you in El Paso, and I was in 7th grade. And I saw it at the El Paso County Coliseum on closed circuit television. Back then there was no pay-per-view, or there was, but it was very limited at the time. So most people, it was like a concert. You'd go to an arena, there'd be a big screen in the middle. Usually the screen and the audio was terrible, and the picture was bad, and it was black and white. But everybody was drinking and having a good time. But so by the second or third fight, no one cared. But it was. I remember being so excited about this fight. I'd been into boxing at that point. I'd say I was, about 12 years old. I'd been into boxing for about 2 or 3 years, pretty strong by then. And this was kind of the culmination of my fandom at the time. It's just two guys that I'd followed their entire career, and it was a fight that was actually happening. It was these two ultra gifted, phenomenal fighters that were actually gonna fight. I mean, it was almost hard to believe. I was so excited that I was waiting outside of my house for my dad and my brother to get home from football practice. I was out there waiting for him, like, let's go.
Let's
Like
go.
I was ready to go, and they're like, okay, hold your horses. We'll be out in a minute. Let us put our stuff down. So, um, yeah, and I just remember, it was everything that I'd hoped it would be, other than the fact that I was a big Hearns fan, and it was definitely a crushing loss that night. But what a fight! I mean, it was an all-time great fight, back and forth. The boxer turned into a puncher. The puncher turned into a boxer. It was just 14 rounds of, as Jim Lampley would say, high drama in the desert.
High drama. Yeah, I mean, it was a terrific fight, and I was a Ray fan, so I was a little concerned if he would hold up to Tommy's punching power. He was the hitman, and I'd seen a Pepito Cuevas fight, and my God, he just destroyed him. So I was a little concerned for my man Sugar Ray Leonard, but he got in there and he had a great fight, and they were, as you say, they kind of did styles that we didn't expect. People thought Tommy was just going to come in and try to bang him and get him out of there, but he actually showed that he could box. And then, Ray had to turn into the brawler. He had that swollen eye midway through the fight, and that bothered him throughout the bout. And you thought that might be keep him from winning. But with all that high drama, the swollen eye, everything that was going on, it was just a terrific fight. And I remember everybody just standing up cheering in their seats. Kind of weird, you're watching it on TV and people are just cheering a fight that's on television or closed circuit or whatever it was back then. But those days are kind of gone now, right? Those stadium fights where you used to go to the stadium or the Coliseum or theater, wherever you went and watch the fight on the big screen. Not much of that going on anymore.
Yeah, they do have, every now and then they'll have open up a theater to show a pay-per-view fight.
Hmm.
Usually Canelo, or back in the day, a few years ago, it was probably Oscar. But yeah, I mean, it was a real um, event. Even if you weren't
Right.
at the event, it was an event at your in your city. You would go, and I remember one card in particular. There was a live card first.
Oh,
An El
wow.
Paso boxer by the name of Tony Perea fought
Hmm.
a live fight once. At the time, it was like for the Texas Heavyweight Championship, whatever that was worth in 1984, and
Hmm.
and he fought the main event, and then they showed the Hearns Duran fight afterwards. So
Hmm.
that was kind of cool. But again, back in those days, the equipment wasn't as good. The picture was often grainy. The sound quality was almost non-existent. But certainly, it was an experience, because it was, everybody, a bunch of fight fans showing up. And back then, there were a lot. There were a lot of fight
There was
fans.
a lot, yeah, right. And it was a major happening. This wasn't like it is nowadays, where you have sort of your niche fans and not everybody really knows what's going on. I mean, they knew that this fight was going on as much as they knew of any NFL game or anything like that. It
Yeah.
was a major sporting event at the time, and everyone knew about it, even whether you were into boxing or not. I mean, everybody knew about this fight.
And yeah, I mean, there was all kinds of commercials beforehand. There was, obviously, it was right about the time ESPN came along, so they were spending all week in Vegas and doing live shots, and it was a giant deal. And um, yeah, it's hard to imagine boxing being as big as it was back then, because, like you said, everybody knew who Sugar Ray Leonard was, and also, it's like you said, it had a lot to do with the Olympics. Back then, the Olympics were huge. I mean,
Right.
the Olympics were something that was uh, just came along every 4 years, and when it came on, you had to watch it. It was
Right.
absolutely must see TV at the time, and
Hmm.
who the heroes that came out of that, they are heroes forever, and Sugar Ray Leonard was one of them. and he, I think a lot of people, he had probably as many haters as fans,
Right.
who
That's what you
certainly helped
need.
the Sugar Ray Leonard brand, right?
Right. I think that's what you need. And in boxing, it's like Floyd said, I don't care if you love me or hate me, but just pay to watch a fight, and that's all that really matters. And the Olympics were such a springboard for boxers back then. I think that's sort of what there's this big hole right now is when people came out of the Olympics back in those days, they were already celebrities. They were already well known. They were already marketable. You talk people like De La Hoya and Evander Holyfield, Sugar Ray Leonard, Howard Davis, and people like that who came out of the Olympics and had these fabulous jump start to their pro careers. Today, they have to build their career as soon as they turn pro and have a few fights, and that's why promoters seem so hesitant to match them against anybody who's any good for about the first 15 or 16 fights until they get somewhere. And I don't know how that's going to change. I remember looking at the Olympics this year and having to work hard to try to find when the boxing was going to be on and what platform and what time. And, it was just very difficult to watch the Olympic boxing. Maybe Shakur Stevenson was the last big Olympic boxer to benefit from that experience. And since then, I know we had a bronze medal winner this year, I believe. But he certainly isn't getting the impact or the jump start that they had back in the day.
Absolutely, and it's just not. Yeah, the Olympics, like you said, they were a springboard to, for every fighter that won a gold medal for sure. I mean,
Right.
you look at the 1984 Olympic team, and everybody knew all of them by name, just like the '76 Olympic team. And it's times have just changed. It's not the springboard it used to be, and there's talk that boxing may not even be included in the Olympics, in which case anymore it doesn't even matter. I mean, I don't think it. I'm not sure it matters anymore.
Right, and that's a tough thing to say. You think the Olympics going to Los Angeles in
Yeah.
2028, and you think that boxing might not be a big thing? That's kind of hard to imagine, but that's a very distinct possibility, especially with all the problems they keep having with scoring and judging and things of that
Right.
nature. It's just, and we didn't even send a full contingent this year to Paris. It's like half the amount of boxers that usually went in the different weight classes. I think we only had about 6 or 7 in Paris.
Yeah, definitely. Times have changed.
Mhm.
So I think the showdown, like I said, I think it kind of that and Leonard versus Duran before that. Those were a couple of fights that not only had huge buildup, but they delivered when they were in the ring. Right?
Exactly right.
They lived. Both fighters lived up to the hype and created something special and something historic, really. Um, it's definitely one of the greatest fights I've ever seen, and definitely one of the greatest fights of the era. And in terms of legacies, I think it certainly uh, propelled Sugar Ray Leonard to heights that I mean, I wouldn't argue with anybody that says he's um, one of the top 5 greatest fighters that ever lived. Uh,
Mhm.
he was just he had it all. He had speed, power, guts, um, stamina. He had everything, and Hearns was right there. He pushed him all the way. By the time they met 8 years later, they weren't the fighters they were certainly in their prime. Although that was a great fight as well.
Right.
But I think in terms of legacy, I don't know that I've ever. I wouldn't argue with anybody who said that they were 2 of the greatest they've ever seen, or in history, or whatever. They are a nightmare for anybody in the history of the sport.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think their legacies continue now. You see them at the fights every now and then, and they're really adored by their fans and people who follow boxing. And It's, their particular fight was one of those fights where you remember where you were, as we talked about a little bit, and you remember the fight, and that's never going to go away, and that's why it's one of the greatest fights of all time, in my opinion.
Yeah, 100%. Um, all right. Well, we'll move on. Speaking of legacies, um, depending on who you ask, Canelo Alvarez may or may not have added to his legacy on Saturday night. 12-round decision over Edgar Berlanga, in a fight that was pretty much predictable. Going in, I don't, nobody expected Berlanga to compete or pull the upset or to do anything special. And as he fought a spunky fight, he was there for all 12 rounds, and he pushed Canelo and as well as he could. So definitely, there's nothing against the fighter himself. He brought to the ring everything he was capable of bringing, and that is certainly not a knock on him. But in terms of Canelo's, a caliber of fighter like Canelo fighting a guy like Berlanga at this stage of his career on pay-per-view on Mexican Independence Day, it's getting tiresome. When there's legitimate challenges out there like David Benavidez and David Morrell and Dimitri Bivol, to fight four guys in the last 22 months or so, more 2 years, more than 2 years, 26 months, I think, that, the odds were against him or against his opponents by wide margins. The betting odds, I mean, it just, it's time to fight somebody who can beat him or retire, in my opinion. It's gone on a long time. It's 2 years of fighting guys that are not capable of beating him. And he looked fine, Berlanga is a big guy. He came in the ring at a reported like 192 pounds or something. So, wasn't no fight is easy, but I think it's probably time for him to pick somebody that is actually worthy of being there.
Yeah, I think it's long been time. And the problem is this: he's at a position where he honestly believes he can pick and choose whoever he wants, and he's got the fan base that's going to follow him wherever he goes and wherever he fights and whomever he fights. I think they had a pretty full house the other night in Vegas, even though they had the big UFC event in town as well. So his fans are going to be there, and it's tough for any of the promoters or organizers or anybody who can say, "Well, no, you need to fight this guy," to tell him that. Back in the day, HBO or Showtime could say, no, you need to fight this guy, you need to fight that guy, or you're not going to be fighting. They don't do that anymore, especially with somebody with the profile of Canelo. And yeah, it's time we took on a Benavidez before even Canelo gets too old to make the fight worthwhile. And I honestly think that would add to his legacy, even though maybe he doesn't come out on top and they have to do a rematch or whatever happens. There's always a time when a fighter gets beat by somebody, and that's okay. That's part of the sport. But like you say, this is getting tiresome. It's not really good for business. It's setting sort of a bad example for the other fighters coming up who think they can just sort of dictate whatever they want to do and fight whomever they want. And that's why you're getting a lot of these long layoffs. People fighting once a year, twice a year. You look back at Sugar Ray Leonard's record; they were fighting every 4 months
Yep.
against monsters. And but now it's like I can do what I want. I'm a superstar. Okay, but are you really giving the fans what they want? You're supposed to be fighting not only for for your family and yourself, but also the fans as well. And these are the kind of fights that boxing has been built on. We just talked about one of the greatest fights in history because it was a good competitive championship fight, and you didn't know who was going to win. Going into these fights where the other guy's not being given much of a chance, I mean, is that worthy of the dollars being spent on it? I don't think so. And I don't think he's going to retire because it's too easy. It's easy money. You know, it's easy money to come out twice a year and pick your opponent who has very little chance of beating you. I mean, why would you retire?
You know, from a business standpoint, from a financial standpoint, I totally understand it, right? I mean, he's getting
Hmm.
paid. People are paying this. It's a supply and demand business, right? I mean,
Right.
so if people are paying this $90 price tag for pay-per-view, then what is his motivation um, for fighting somebody who can take his head off
Hmm.
um, for just as much money, right? I mean,
Right.
there's no motivation to do that because he's getting paid millions of dollars regardless of who he fights, and
Exactly.
the public is responding with their wallets, with their dollars, with
Hmm.
their presence at these fights, with their excitement of a fight that really going in was nothing more than a sparring match. So
Hmm.
from a business standpoint, yeah, I mean, why would I change? Why wouldn't
Hmm.
I just keep doing um, what I'm doing? Um, but from a boxing perspective, from a history perspective, from a Mexican boxing perspective, you know, there's got to be um, a little feeling or a little voice in him that says, okay, I need to really pick a good opponent now. I need to fight someone who
Right.
can test me. I would think, he's a proud man. He's a great champion. There's no doubt about that. But to
Hmm.
be fighting guys that are 25-1 underdogs, 15-1 underdogs. I mean, for him, 4-1 are close odds. You know,
Right.
um, so it's just at some point, when does pride come in? When does integrity and a commitment to the fan and the fans come in, and the real boxing fans? But I guess I'm conflicted there because the real fans are responding with their hard-earned money and they're praising him after the fight anyway. So again, it goes back to business-wise. Why should he do it? He's getting the credit and he's getting the money.
Right. It's almost like a residency, right? Like a performer. You know, you do your two shows a year, and it's so limited, and you don't get to see them very often that they come. It doesn't matter who they fight, and that's like you say, that's just the way it is nowadays. I remember Oscar was fighting that way a little bit towards the end of his career. He was fighting on the Mexican Independence Days and in May and September, but he was taking on pretty good challenges back then.
Yeah,
You know, he
yeah. I
wasn't
mean,
really. He had a few soft spots, but he mostly was fighting pretty quality competition and even taking some losses.
he was fighting tough competition, um, right out of the chute. Guys like Rafael Relas and Chicanito Hernandez, and those were
Hmm.
both on Mexican or Mexican holidays.
Right.
And then of course Chavez, and he continued to move up, fighting guys like
Hmm.
Corte and uh, and Vargas later on, which was a huge
Hmm.
fight at the time, and it was a
Right.
huge fight because you know Vargas was fighting very well at the time and very capable of beating him, and it was a great fight,
Hmm.
and we got
Right.
and it's so great that here we are 20 something years later, and we remember that fight. We remember where we watched that fight. We remember the build up
Yeah.
for that fight. We remember everything about it.
Right. Yeah. That actually was the first fight I covered as the boxing beat writer for the New York Post was Oscar Vargas fight. So uh, and I remember that being a very exciting fight.
Yeah.
Fans were very much into that fight. So there's nothing really to force the fighters to come together anymore. There's no HBO to do it. There's no Showtime to do it. The promoters are more interested in these long-term contracts with their media platforms and things of that
Yeah.
nature. And so the fighters are, and the fighters are making a lot more money than they used to make, and so they don't necessarily have to fight, especially the stars, as often as they maybe once did to make the kind of money they want to make. So I just don't know if it's going to get any better, really.
Yeah. It seems like, and you were alluding to this a few minutes ago, and I wrote this, and I'm going to send you a column on this for Fight Scribes. But it seems like, whereas in our day, we were paying to see a good fight, we were paying to see
Hmm.
two good fighters who were pitted against each other. Now it seems like fans are paying to see, as you said, almost a residency. They're just looking to see a performance from a superstar, regardless of who he's
Hmm.
fighting. And
Hmm.
that seems to be the difference. It's the Jake Paul thing, right? It's I think with Canelo, I think that's I don't think it even matters who's in the opposite corner anymore. Uh, as
Right.
long as he's in a real fight, in a real boxing match,
Hmm.
people are going to pay. And I'm sure the pay per view receipts for this are going to be just as good as they've always been.
Hmm. Yeah, that would be interesting to see, especially given the fact they went up against the UFC. But right now, maybe those are two different crowds now. One doesn't really impact the other anymore. Maybe it does, but they don't usually reveal those numbers unless they're very good. So we might not ever hear exactly what they did on that fight.
Well, that's a good transition to UFC. They had a big fight card at the Sphere on Saturday night, competing with Canelo Alvarez. Uh, what'd you think of that, George?
Well, the attraction was the sphere, no doubt about it. Usually when you have fights, you talk about the fighters and their records and the titles that they're fighting for and what it means if they win. But this was all about the show. And Dana White had said it was going to be the greatest sporting event of all time or whatever. It was certainly fascinating by the pictures and the things that I saw. Uh, a lot different, cost a lot of money. Dana was complaining about having to spend $20 million for the production of the event, and you could see where a lot of that money went to. It was very visual, and it did bring people into the element of feeling like they were there. Uh, but the title fight was a stinker, and the co-main event was a stinker, and so I think people left there with mixed feelings. It's okay to do something one time. Everybody wants to see what something looks one time. I don't expect there to be a lot of MMA events there, or even boxing events. Maybe boxing goes there once or twice, but Dana basically said it was a one and done thing, and he reiterated that point after the match because he says he's got a contract with MGM, so that's where he's going to have his fights. But it was certainly something that you hadn't seen before. Uh, it was okay to do it once. I don't know if it's going to be as big as if they do it again.
Yeah, I was just a little, it kind of speaks to where boxing is at. I think that boxing didn't do it first, right? It would have been a cool thing for the sport of boxing to do that first, but you know, Dana White uh, is, he is kind of he's the president of an organization where there's some structure, and he's brought that structure to the sport, and that's its strength. And so I feel like they can afford to do things like this more readily than boxing, because boxing is just so splintered, and they have
Right.
boxing just has such a hard time coming together and agreeing on things and putting fights together. Whereas Dana White has his league, he makes the fights, um,
Right.
and they happen.
Right. Can you imagine boxing? You can pick your promotional company, whichever one you want, Top Rank, Al Heyman's group, Premier Boxing, and Matchroom. If every boxer was under one banner, Can you imagine the fights that you would see? And they had the power to make the fights and force the fighters to fight each other. And that's how the UFC was built. They all had all the best fighters.
Right.
They could make the fights. They could make them fight each other. And now they've got $1 billion a business, multi-billion-dollar business. Uh, just think of every big boxer was under Top Rank, the fights that we would see, and how big they would be. And you would have the revenue to do something like they did, like the UFC did last week, to put a $20 million production together. There's no boxing promotional company that's going to do that with that kind of money on one fight. They're not going to do it. Nobody's going to do that.
Well, the Saudi Arabian gentleman is certainly bringing some interesting things into the sport, infusing it with definitely some money, and there was talk, and there is talk that he is going to put a similar UFC-like league together, consisting of X amount of fighters that will kind of, in a, I guess, like a structured tournament-like, thing that, everybody has to fight the fight, right? That they're getting paid to fight. So, opinions are mixed in terms of that's, good or bad, long term, short term. It's impossible to know that right now, but certainly Saudi Arabia is making its presence known in a sport that needs help and needs cleaning up, and it would be difficult to do, but that kind of money speaks volumes, as we know.
Right. Was he at the UFC fight Saturday? I think he went to the UFC.
He was. That was the big controversy. Was that he was going to the UFC event rather than the Canelo event. Some people thought it was because Canelo said no to his proposed Terence Crawford fight offer. That he's trying to get him back a little bit. Maybe some truth to that. Who knows?
Could be.
But definitely, making things interesting. And if he does do some of the things that he says he's going to do, or that there's rumored to do, it will probably be the biggest change in the sport of our lifetimes. Right? I mean, it will be the most significant, structure change that we've ever seen in the sport.
Right. Could be. I mean, that's kind of a wait and see thing. There's always been a lot of people that have come into the boxing world and said they were going to get things right and change it and clean it up. And, there's always somebody doing that. So we'll see. It's a different animal, this boxing world. Some people get into it and realize it, and then they get out. So we'll see. It's always good to have people interested and coming into it and wanting to take it to another level. So hopefully he can do that.
Right. So moving on, we do have a big fight coming up on Saturday night. Here is probably in the United States, it's more Saturday afternoonish, late afternoon, but it's Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois for the IBF Heavyweight Championship. Dubois is the champion going into this. He's proven himself to be a very capable fighter in his last couple of fights, and he showed some grit when he fought Usyk about a year and a half ago. A lot of people, he landed that body shot in like the 7th round, and Usyk went down. A lot of people thought it was low, they called it low. It was right on the belt line, but a lot of people thought it was a fair shot. For a minute there, it looked like Usyk's reign was over. But they called it a foul, and Usyk went on to win. But it was quite a showing, and he's 2-0 since. with a win over Big Baby Miller and a 17-0 fighter by the name of Hergovic. So,
Mhm.
um, I with Anthony Joshua, you kind of you kind of sometimes lately you don't really know what you're going to get, but he certainly looked like Anthony Joshua again when he knocked out Nagano.
Mhm.
Um, you know, last year. He hasn't fought since. I think Dubois is a real. I mean, he is the champion going in, but I think most people expect Joshua to win this. But Dubois has been active. He's certainly acquired a lot of experience over the last 2 years. He can punch. He's smart. He's good chin. Tough guy. I think I'm going. I think there could be an upset Saturday at Wembley
You're
Stadium.
talking yourself into it, right?
I am. You
Yeah,
can see that.
I think
You can
so.
see that working. That's right.
Yeah, I think so. I think he's got a valid chance to win this fight. There's no question about it. I think Joshua, you're talking about his last fight, he was impressive, but he was fighting an MMA fighter,
Yeah.
you know. And then a lot of the building around this fight is Anthony Joshua has a chance to become a three-time heavyweight champion. And you think about that, and that used to really mean something, but it doesn't really mean much anymore at all. How many
Right.
times you've been champion of the IBF or the whatever alphabet sanctioning organization you might be trying to get a belt from. Uh, you look at Anthony Joshua's career and you feel like it sort of didn't quite reach the level it should have. Certainly, his big debut on American soil didn't go well when he fought Ruiz, and he's just sort of been, I don't know, he just a guy who didn't live up to all the hype, in my opinion. Does he have a chance still to do that? Maybe so. Maybe so. Probably not. I mean, he seemed to have lost just about every huge fight he's had, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, and he just really hasn't been very impressive. I mean, when you look at his career, you're not going to rank him anywhere near among the best heavyweights who ever fought.
Right.
And he's just kind of staying busy right now. It's kind of a staying busy fighting. And it's interesting to see that the heavyweight division has kind of gotten back to mediocrity again,
Yeah.
except for Usyk. And needless to say, however the heavyweight division goes, that's how boxing goes. And so it should be a good fight. I hope it's a good fight. I think Dubois has a good chance of winning. I kind of hope he wins. And we'll see what happens from here. I guess the winner fights the winner of the rematch between Fury and Usyk. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree, and definitely. I mean, I think Joshua was one of those fighters where the cake never quite rose as expected. Um, I think after the Klitschko fight, people were really, the expectations were through the roof. They were they were as big as he is. But
Hmm.
the Ruiz fight seemed to just, I mean, it came out of nowhere. It just completely deflated any kind of you know hopes of him being one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. I think because he, like you said, he just hasn't looked all that great since then. He's fought two tough fights with Usyk, but those are two fights that he could have won, and some people say should have won. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, we'll see. I think I do give him credit for fighting this fight. It's a difficult fight. It's not a
Hmm.
gimme. It's against a tough guy, a guy who's on a winning streak. So, he certainly deserves credit for taking this fight at this point in his career when he could have just waited around, for the Usyk Fury rematch winner. He could have done that, but he's not.
Right.
So I give him credit for his grit and his determination. And who knows? Maybe that'll play out in the ring, and he'll be in line for a biggest fight of his career after this.
Right.
Okay, on to some pigskin. Uh, interesting weekend. Interesting week 2 uh, in the National Football League. Um, We had some good, we had some bad, and we had some ugly. So
Right.
let's start. I'll happily start with the good because the LA Chargers are looking shockingly good. So we'll say the three good would be Chargers, Steelers, Saints. Um, I saw the Charger game, obviously, and I'll it's time to put that right there. My Charger jersey there, LT. Um,
LT.
so yeah, they look
LT
good.
too.
They are a Jim Harbaugh team, and the fact that he's accomplished this in 2 games is nothing short of phenomenal. I had my doubts going in after they gave away, you know, Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and Austin Eckler. I just didn't know how they were going to make up for that kind of a loss, but they have, and they are playing great football. They were running the ball. Dobbins looks spectacular. 17 carries, 131 yards, and a touchdown. Um, so yeah, looking very good. Defensively, they're looking very good. So yeah, I'm definitely happy about that, and I won't give you too hard of a time with the Chargers beating the Raiders in Week 1.
Yeah, Raiders bounced back though. We got the Ravens, so we're 1-1. That's all good. You know, we're heading in the right direction, I believe. And I didn't list them with a good. It's sort of more average than that. I think a good situation is the Steelers. I mean, they went in there losing Russell Wilson, and now Justin Fields has been their quarterback, and they've managed to win a couple of football games. So, good for them. They're going to be in the mix. But I think the Saints have just been phenomenal. They've come out of nowhere and played just tremendous football with Derek Carr at quarterback and whipping the Cowboys last week. And you got to believe this team is for real because they are
Yeah,
just seem unstoppable the first 2 weeks of the season.
yeah. Kamara won a lot of people their fantasy football weeks yesterday, right? 4 touchdowns.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Um,
I mean, good player. You always know he's going to be a good player. But I mean, man, he's really turned it on right now. So they just look really good. They got a couple of receivers that are young and aggressive and making some plays. And so I think that's a team you have to keep an eye out for. They're going to build some momentum here and in that city that they play for. I think that helps. And so I think the Saints are going to be a big problem for teams this year.
Yeah, I think when we started this, I said that the Falcons were going to be the surprise team.
Right.
I was wrong. It looks like it's gonna be the Saints.
Right,
Um,
exactly. I mean, it's going to take a while. I think the other team that's playing good football is the Vikings. I mean, they lose the rookie quarterback to start the year, and they've just put a couple of games together that have been really solid, and you've got to like what they've done over there, especially with nobody gave with Sam Darnold much of a chance to play like he's played. He certainly didn't play like this when he was with the Jets, and so the Vikings look like they're a very formidable team too.
yeah, yeah. Sometimes it's just a change of scenery changes the whole thing, right? Let's go with the bad now. Got the Bengals. Um, just can't seem to. They played okay yesterday. They just couldn't seem to get it done, and it just seems that they're a little bit in some disarray.
Right. This, you put the Bengals and the Ravens kind of together in the same 0-2 start. Teams that you would have thought they would have gotten a couple, at least one win by now, and they start out the shoot 0-2, even though they've got their quarterbacks and they've got their main players healthy. Uh, then you got to turn to the coach to try to get them to understand that their seasons aren't over yet. I know the
Right.
percentage is very low once you start out 0-2 as far as reaching the Super Bowl. But I remember a Giants team that started 0-2 and won a Super Bowl, so it can be done.
Yeah.
But these are just kind of two surprises that are 0-2 at this stage of the season.
And Cowboys did too, right? They started off 0-2, I think, and won the Super Bowl. I think
Right. It's been so long ago,
the
nobody
last time
remembers.
they won the Super Bowl, which was 50 centuries
Right.
ago, right?
Right. So it can be done, and they're two very good football teams. So you would think that they would be able to bounce back a little bit, but certainly they need to win this week. You
Yeah.
can't go 0-3.
And then the Rams, they're certainly struggling. You know, the McVay Express has certainly cooled down a little bit in recent years. What's your take on
Mhm.
that?
Well, bad news today for them. They lost Cooper Cup to an ankle injury, so he's going to be out. And that means they've lost their top two receivers now. So once you started during that train, that's not good. So it's going to be interesting to see how they game plan with that, having, the two biggest weapons are going to be out. So it doesn't look like things are going to get much better there.
Right. Ravens, no one expected them. I think I said they'd be in the AFC Championship.
Mhm.
Again, it could still happen, but they have some work to do to get that done.
Right. I mean, I had them going a long way too, but certainly, like I said, they need to win this week, or else they're going to be in real trouble. So it's going to be a big week of football for them. They've got to get the win. And if they can get the win, they can write their course and go from there.
Right. Right. And then, well, of course, we have to throw the Cowboys in there too. They looked pretty. I mean, they won week 1, but a team like the Cowboys probably shouldn't be getting beat um, at home uh, like that ever. That was a bad showing.
Right, but Cowboys have those kind of games in them sometimes. They look great and then they don't look too good. Things happen, but they've got a lot of talent. They'll be able to bounce back.
And then finally, the really bad, the ugly, would be the Giants and the Dolphins. Uh,
Yeah, terrible.
the Dolphins in particular, and they're in. Uh, they may be in crisis mode with Tua going out and losing like they did, and what I find interesting in this season in particular is it seems like just after 2 weeks, it seems like some teams are already in crisis mode. It's already like, oh wow, there's still, there's still 16 weeks to go. So, it's a bad time to be in crisis mode. So that leaves us with the ugly, which is uh, the Dolphins and the Giants. The Dolphins are in crisis mode. It looks like lost their quarterback. Who knows when he'll be back? If he'll ever be back. When they lost bad, it just the whole scene looked really ugly on Thursday night. And then, what is your take on all that, George?
Yeah, I mean, Tua going down like that was really the worst case scenario for them, and the play was really terrible. I mean, the kid's got to know he's got to slide, he's got to go down. He goes head first into the guy. It really wasn't even a hard tackle. It's just the way he went
Right.
into Hamlin, jerked his neck back, and suffered a concussion, obviously. And I don't know if he's going to be able to really play football like that anymore. You worry about somebody, and he seems to have these violent concussions too, where everything sort of goes into his hands go crazy and things like that. It's very ugly, disturbing scene. So you worry about him. I mean, his physical health has to be a priority, and he just signed a big contract and everything else, and he can't uh, really go into a season where the quarterback is fragile as that. And I was a little bit surprised they signed him to that big of a contract, but of course there's some escape clauses if he can't play, so we'll see what happens there. But the
Yeah, I
other
mean,
team is go ahead.
there are, I've heard multiple reports that, they brought in special instructors, to teach him how to slide. They've spent money, time, to specifically to teach him how to slide. Um, but I mean, he's a football player. And there's, someone came up with a good point the other day. He was trying to win the game by himself. They were behind. They hadn't done much all game, so he was trying to make something happen, and there's trying to create some sort of spark, which you can certainly understand, and you can certainly appreciate. But for him to have sustained so many of these concussions and to be playing football so recklessly is just mind-boggling. And like you said, it wasn't a different kind of hit. It was very typical. But the way he goes in, the way he kind of drops his head, I mean, like if he's a fullback,
Right.
I mean, they are just, I mean, this is not 1950s anymore. You can't, these guys are monsters and you can't do that. And um, he should have known that. And
Right.
now his career is, his career's in jeopardy. And like you said, I'm not sure we'll ever see him again. We'll see. He says he's not going to retire. So,
Yeah.
you know, but I was thinking this too, but as two guys who have covered a lot of boxing, I knew instantly that he was knocked out. Just this whole,
Mm-hmm.
The way that he reacted after that shot, it was pretty obvious.
Yeah, pretty devastating. Speaking of Jeopardy, I mean, the Giants head coach's job. Giants head coach was asked if his job was in jeopardy at a press conference today, and he just kind of glared at the reporter who asked the question. So it's going to be a rough season for Dayball down in New York if things keep going the way they're going. There was a lot of talk and discussion about putting the kicker active, even though he had a groin issue, and then the kicker wound up Graham Gano hurt his hamstring during the game, and he
Yep.
wasn't available at the end of the game when they needed a field goal to win. So, coach is taking a tremendous amount of heat in New York for that, and it doesn't look like he's too accustomed to handling the heat, and that's a very bad combination in that city. Trust me. I mean, if you don't like
Yeah.
getting the
Well,
tough questions in week 2, it's going to be a long year.
well, it's a bad profession to be in if you can't handle the heat, but it's an especially bad profession to be in if you're in New
Yeah.
York.
Right, exactly. I mean, he glared at the reporter and he glared back, and I'm like, dude, it's like a long year. I mean, you can't get upset. I understand the coach's point. He had a groin injury going in. He said the groin was fine, but then he pulled a hamstring trying to cover a kick. I'm like, first of all, how fast could he have been going? Kickers, they don't sprint down the field. Kickers try to avoid contact. They usually head for the sideline. And he pulled a hamstring. So I think that was the biggest oddity that I ever heard. The kicker pulled a hamstring trying to make a I don't know.
Yeah.
That tells me your season's going nowhere right there.
Yeah. It sounds bad, and like you said, if
Mm-hmm.
you're arguing and if you're glaring, if you're mad dogging reporters at a press conference
In week 2.
in week 2, it doesn't speak well for the next few months, right?
Yeah.
Uh, all right. Well, we have with both of with us being from the borderland and being the borderland boys, we have especially keen interest in the pigskin down on the border in the borderland, and it's not looking good. Not looking good at all
Mhm.
for either Harvard on the border, UTEP, or that other school down I-10.
Yeah.
I forget their name, but they're in Las
Mexico
Cruces.
State.
That's right.
I got a text from a good friend today that I had not. Well, he's a good friend, but I hadn't talked to him in a while, and he sends me this text, and he goes, isn't this your school? And he sends me a picture of the University of New Mexico. And I'm like, dude, no, 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 no. Sometimes it's okay, but no, we're New Mexico State Ag. We had a great football season last year.
Yes.
And of course, with the portal, everybody left. Quarterback left, head coach left, defensive coordinator left, backup quarterback left. I mean, when your backup quarterback leaves, what are you going to do? And so this year, Tony Sanchez is the head coach, and they just haven't played well at all. Their offense really stinks. They have been getting no production there, and they couldn't stop Fresno State at all this past weekend. So there's a lot of work to be done. I think schools like UTEP and New Mexico State, they're in a tough spot with this portal situation because anything that they try to develop is going to be taken from them. Players are going to be going to bigger schools for more NIL money, et cetera, et cetera. So where do you position yourself? Do you position yourself as a school that produces players that can go someplace else? I think that's where you have to fit yourself, but it's tough. It's tough to have all your good players leave and start all over again, and develop those players, and then have all those players leave. So I think it's a really difficult situation for both programs.
Yeah, it's for New Mexico State. It's really too bad that the quarterback Diego Pavia he
Hmm.
took off to Vanderbilt, who they lost Saturday, but they've been looking they've been looking very very good. Pavia's
Yeah.
a really good, fun quarterback to watch, plucky, and does a lot of good things. And then Jerry Kill, the head coach, he went with him, and he's some sort of coordinator. Over there, at Vandy. So, not coordinator, but you know, he's
I think
not
he's
a
like
coach.
an offensive assistant.
You were right,
He's like an
right.
offensive assistant.
And
But
it's really too bad for New Mexico State because they had a tremendous season. They beat Auburn in what was easily the biggest win in program history.
he's,
They went to a bowl game. Um, it was just a Cinderella season. It was a great season, and there was a point there that I thought the program was in such disarray. I thought it was never going to do anything again. So for Jerry Kill to do that kind of uh, comeback story was truly amazing. But it's disappointing that, like you say, with the transfer portal and everything, programs like the Cinderella seasons don't turn into dynasties. It's one and done,
right.
and then they take off.
Right. I think that's
Um,
the way they find themselves in that situation too. So, we'll see. Maybe they can develop something, get some players to step up a little bit, and you got new coaching staffs at both schools. That's going to take some time to implement anyway. So maybe you hope for the best. Maybe a couple of games here or there, they can surprise some people and get some big wins and maybe get things turned around a little bit and see what happens.
right, and as for UTEP, they're now 0-3 under a new head coach Scotty Walden. Um, yeah, they lost to Liberty, one of the best teams in the conference Saturday.
Hmm.
They're not really competitive. They lost their home opener uh, to Utah State. Um, I think it's Utah State. I already forgot. But they're not a good team. It's gonna take a lot for this new coach to resurrect that program. And I think one of the coaches said, well, in order for it to be reborn, for the program to be reborn, doesn't it have to be born first? So, yeah, it's UTEP football, not exactly a nationally known entity. I was there. I covered, two or three of the best years they ever had when Mike Price was there, and they went to a couple of bowl games, and those were certainly fun seasons to cover. But since then, it's been pretty much the same old UTEP, one of the losingest programs in the nation. And like you say, I don't know with the current, the way things are now in terms of the transfer portal. I don't know how you get kids to stay because they all are going to leave eventually if
Right.
they turn in really good seasons. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what happens. But it's going to take Coach Walden some time to put this
Right.
thing together.
No
Um,
question.
anything else, George? Have we covered everything?
I think we've covered everything for this week. I mean, we've got a lot of things coming up here, and especially for this podcast, we've got a couple of guests that are going to be coming up and talking to us about what they want to talk about, and we'll see what's going to develop from there. But looking forward to this. Should be a good week. And we'll see. The world of sports is always intriguing and interesting, so we'll see what develops.
That's right. That's right. Before we go, I just want to give a shout out to the Christ the King Screaming Eagles 4th grade team, 9-0 on the season.
All right.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, it's been
And who
fun.
are the Screaming Eagles?
What's that?
And who are the Screaming Eagles?
Christ the King Elementary School in Chicago, Illinois. In
Oh, okay. Right.
Beverly, Chicago. That's right.
Okay.
4th
Right on.
grader named Mandy Aguilar is something to watch.